Have you realized what you signed up for here? Yes? This is going to be highly experiential. It's not just going to be me talking, it's going to be you doing as well, and you're going to get up and practice your networking skills. My name is Henrik, and I have the pleasure of entertaining you over the next couple of hours, where we'll talk a bit about networking and sort of the science of meeting people. How do you come across as a professional, likable person that people want to work with, people want to hire, people want to work for, potentially if you're starting your own business. So we'll talk a little bit about the sort of ins and outs and try to do some practical exercises around how you can improve your personal elevator pitch and how you get into conversation with people in the best possible ways. We'll also do some really practical, or at least touch on some really practical stuff around how to manage your network in a more professional way on LinkedIn, how to send email introductions in the best way, how to accept those introductions, and so on. So just like some of the ins and outs around professional networking. And the reason why you spend time on this, I'd love to get your input on why you're here in a second, but if you ask any professional, any successful person in the world, they will probably tell you that their network was a big part of how they got to where they are today. Right? Networking is just extremely essential, pretty much no matter what career path you choose to take. Then being good with people and being able to manage your network in a professional way will get you places. Your technical skills and knowledge account to only about 15% of your success. Like 85% of the reason why you're able to land a job and keep that job and advance in that job are attributed to your people skills, right? It's like how good you are connecting with your employer and your colleagues. That's really what will matter in your career, way more than your actual skills. It's kind of sad in a way, but that's the reality of things. So if you become really good at networking and really good at creating these relations, you will be able to advance much, much faster. And if we, if we sort of look at some of these aspects in relation to you, I'd love to hear sort of why you're here. Why did you just sign up for a 2-hour session on networking? What are some of the things that you feel is hard when it comes to networking, or what specific aspects of networking would you like us to touch upon today? Why are you here?
I'm mostly here because I feel like you can never get enough knowledge about networking, your social life and things. And I'm at a good place right now where I like to think that I'm fairly networked around uni.
Yeah.
I have a job at uni, I volunteer, I have friends, I study, and but I still find there's a gap when I try to confront people or when I'm talking to a group of new people, sort of how to grasp their attention, how to get them to engage with me in the right way. So I felt this
it's about
would be
being
the right place to come and find out.
So be proactive about getting even to the next level. Yeah, very good. But how many of you are entrepreneurs? So, yeah? Good. Okay, maybe one thing I wanted to mention as well, that the reason why I'm here, so I'm based in San Francisco usually, and then I fly down here to work with Deakin twice a year as part of the Spark program. Are you all familiar with Spark? I guess that's how you signed up. So that's the sort of relatively new entrepreneurship initiative at Deakin University, where we run a bunch of different events, seminars, workshops. You can apply to get seed funding for your company. So if you're pretty serious about bringing your ideas to the next level, you can get up to $10,000 in grant funding, so non-equity based, which is pretty awesome. I believe you were one of our successful aspiring entrepreneurs, already entrepreneurs, now going full-time, more or less. Yeah, so that's exciting. You get access to mentorship and a bunch of other things. So definitely check out Spark and follow the email newsletter if you're interested in more events like this. I'll get to my own introduction in a couple of seconds. Good, so we have some entrepreneurs, and then how many people are students still? Full-time students, good. And how many are working professionals? Good, okay, so we have a great mix here this evening, and that will make for a much more interesting workshop. Any other sort of input on why you're here, what are your expectations for the next 2 hours? What would you like to get out of this?
I feel like I'm pretty good at my job.
Yep.
And I just want more people to increase my demand. So get more people to know about it so that I can
Yep.
make a stronger bargaining position when it's time for getting more pay and all that sort of stuff as well. And that's even just, and then of course, growing that skill base so I can launch into something myself, but initially sort of.
Yeah, so overall just career enhancement. And yeah. Good point. What about you?
I kind of want to know the difference between networking and manipulation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like when a lot of people say like, oh yeah, I'm networking at a nightclub while you're supposed to be.
Very good. Yeah.
I don't really know what the word networking specifically refers to.
Yeah. And it can mean many things. Sometimes your main objective is to find a date, right? And the networking event can be a good place to do that too. And other times you're looking to land a job or to get input in your field of expertise. You're networking at a conference where there are other specialists in that area, and you want to sort of create good relations with these experts in your industry, so you're able to call them up whenever you have a challenge that you need to overcome with your everyday jobs. What are the typical fears, or why do you sort of need to network? Like, why do people network? Yes, so one example is at the nightclub, sure, for one specific objective. But why else? Yeah.
Learn who the influencers are.
Yeah, to learn who the influencers are in your industry. Yeah, and get in touch with them so you can use them whenever you need it. Yeah.
To make new contacts.
To make new contacts, like new friends, so socially or acquaintances. Yeah. Yeah.
To engage correctly.
To engage correctly. Is that why you're networking, or
That's why you need to increase skills.
why you need to increase your skills in this area? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there can be many different reasons. Yeah.
To find a new resource and to find out what you can use.
To find a new resource for in your current job. So find.
For everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, for example, not only for a job. For example, you need a doctor, and then you would learn from a friend and who is better than others.
Yeah. So there can be many good reasons why to do it. Interesting stat is that the best jobs, if you're sort of in that space, and you haven't graduated yet, but at some point you need to sort of land your first full-time job, the best jobs are never advertised, right? You get those jobs through networking. And again, it's not just your knowledge and skills that will come into play, it's like who you know, right? In Silicon Valley, we tell you that your network is your net worth. Right? It's not just what you know, it's the people you know that will take you places, right? So your network is your net worth, and that's also why it's actually a pretty big ask when you're asking for a high-level introduction, right? If you're asking to get introduced to some really high-level person, that's a pretty big ask, and it's a pretty big favor. And people tend to underestimate how long time it takes to sort of build that quality network, and then also don't really appreciate when people get out of the way to make an introduction. And then you make the mistake of not making them feel appreciated for that, and then they're not going to introduce you again. So we'll talk a little bit about that sort of networking equation and how you can avoid making the mistake of overusing some of your existing contacts so that they won't help you out in the future. So here we get to the slides. Like, what are the typical fears of networking? Like, how often do you go to networking events? How many of you have been to a networking event in the last 6 months? Okay, not that many. How many within the last month? Okay, so it's not something you do that frequently. It's interesting. So I don't know how many events there are, sort of, but I reckon there's probably at least a couple of events every month you could go to if you're really proactive about expanding your network, either here in Geelong or in Melbourne. But in San Francisco, there are events every single night, right? In all different industries. There are startup pitch nights, community events, hackathons, startup weekends, all different types of events where you can go out and find really interesting people to meet. It's really exhausting. And one of the sort of untold truth about networking is that everyone hates it, right? No one likes to network. It's uncomfortable for everyone to go into a room full of strangers and try to befriend them. And yeah, it's like, well, how do I sort of make myself look good? It's like I'm manipulating people to give me a favor, or is that?
I would like to do this as my job, and the people that I want to meet throughout my lifetime, I'd like
Yeah.
to befriend them on a real level if I can. So it's like I want to set up some sort of
Yeah.
weird, like this is only professional relationship kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd like to do.
Yeah, so we'll talk about sort of how to balance some of those conversations, right? Where sometimes it might be beneficial to only create a personal relationship with a person you meet at a networking event, where you don't even talk about your job, you don't even talk much about yourself and what you're looking for. You're just trying to build the relationship first, and then later on you can come up with the ask if you're looking for that job position or something like that. And in other instances, you might need to sort of get to the point much quicker, much faster. Yeah. What's typically the most uncomfortable for you? So you've gone to some of these conferences and networking events. You get into a room full of people. Everyone is chatting.
You know nobody.
You didn't know anybody? Yeah. And you're like the lonely wolf in the bar. Yeah, exactly. I remember my first time really going to an actual networking event. So I'm from Denmark originally. And in Denmark, it's a little bit about this. I think we have somewhat of the same culture as here in Australia, to some extent at least. We don't talk a lot about ourselves. You have this tall puppy syndrome here, right? You're all familiar with that? We can't really talk too much about ourselves and somebody will knock us down, right? In Denmark, we call that the Jante law, the law of Jante. And it's the same thing, right? You shouldn't try to stick out. You shouldn't try to be above average. If you try to be special and unique, people will tell you, hey, just try to blend in, try to be normal. Don't do anything extraordinary. So coming to San Francisco is quite a culture shock because every student graduating from Stanford University truly believes they're going to change the world, right? And they can build $1 billion company with a B. That's the kind of attitude that people have and the level of self-confidence that they have. And they love talking about themselves and their projects and all that stuff. So I came out sort of pretty much fresh off the boat from Denmark and signed up for this networking event. It turned out that was it is the biggest networking event in all the Bay Area. So there's like over 300 people in this room and the energy was just buzzing, right? Everyone was talking to one another and they're drinking beers and it seemed like they're all best friends. And I was like the only one there who didn't know a single person. So I almost left, right? If it wasn't because I already paid $20 to attend this event, then I'd probably left at that moment because it was so uncomfortable and it's such a daunting thing to go in there. But I did manage to escape because very quickly somebody came over and said, hey, I'm Bill, how's it going? So what's your name? Where are you from? What are you working on right now? How big is your startup team? How much money have you raised? How much do you want to raise? What are your next milestones? What are the kind of teammates you're looking for right now? And it's just like bombarding me with questions. And I had no idea what to answer. I was just like, I started talking about my family's dog back in Denmark and, just like rambling on about totally irrelevant stuff. And very quickly, Bill was like, oh, sounds good, Henrik. Best of luck with that. Take care, right? And I was like, oh, I suck. Nobody's going to want to hear about me and my startup, and I'm never going to be able to connect with anyone, right? So having this elevator pitch ready at a networking event is super crucial, right? So if you don't have that 30-second elevator pitch ready, where you very quickly can communicate what you're working on, what you might be able to offer to this other person, and what you're looking for, then people are simply not going to engage with you, especially not in a very networking-tuned culture as in Silicon Valley. Because people go to these networking events not just to meet friends, but really with a mission to meet 20 new valuable contacts in an hour, right? So you only have 3 minutes with this individual. It's not to sort of talk forever. It's simply to go in there, find out what potential synergies could there be between us? How can I help you? How can you help me? Are there any sort of common ground? And if so, then we exchange business cards and we can meet for coffee. Or maybe, it's one of the other things that's really fascinating about the networking culture in Silicon Valley. People don't have this kind of whiffy, what's in it for me? They believe in paying forward. So they're willing to always open up their network and sit down with a stranger and share their own insights, give you feedback on your idea if you're working on a startup. The first hour is always free. With accountants, with lawyers, with entrepreneurs, with investors, the first hour is always free. And every time I talk to somebody, I think about my own Rolodex, my own LinkedIn contacts, and like, who do I know that you might benefit from talking to? Right? Or who do I know who could benefit from talking to you? And then you open up your network, even to complete strangers, and say like, hey, you know what? I'm not an expert in artificial intelligence, but I know an MIT professor who just got a $50 million grant to research in this field, and I'll totally link you guys up, right? If that's the space in which your startup is operating, right? So people are really good at opening up their networks. And what I found in other sort of startup ecosystems around the world is that people are not so good about that, right? What would you say here in Australia? Are people good at opening up their networks and utilizing each other that way? Pretty good?
Really?
Not really?
No.
No? Something that we could probably improve.
Yeah, I've been living in Australia for 3
Yeah.
and from Sweden. So Sweden is much more other culture for opening up other people's
Really?
network.
Oh, that's interesting.
We send people each other to
Yeah.
what you need, but here you just you have to know the person
Yeah.
before we open up the network.
Yeah.
And setting up new business can be quite hard.
So a bit more careful about utilizing those contacts. Yeah, yeah. Interesting, right? But hopefully from now on, you're going to be the ambassadors for this more networked, open-minded culture, right? Where we start really leveraging each other's networks. Because that's one of the things that makes Silicon Valley work, is that it's like one big, we'll talk about these sort of networks communities before or later on, but Silicon Valley is like one big black dot. Everyone knows each other. And they're super good at connecting people to one another. And then they do these 20-minute coffee conversations, and then you get new open doors. Right? It's completely unpredictable what might happen when you go to a networking event. You can meet anyone in these sessions that might give you great feedback on your idea, or might open another door to another business contact that you might benefit from meeting. So these are some of the themes we could dive into tonight, and as you can imagine, there are like an infinite amount of different aspects of being a good networker that we could talk about, but those are the ones that I feel the most interesting. So we'll talk about practical stuff, how to work the room, how to enter a conversation to begin with. We'll talk about some of the facts around body language, that it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So how do you keep good body language and maintain that in the best possible way? What kind of questions to ask, how to be memorable and standing out, managing anxiety. We'll talk about, all those sorts of practical things. Is that good? Yeah? Alrighty, so some of you might be wondering, who is this dude with a weird Danish accent? And it's true, this was me 30 years ago. No, it's not, but it looks kind of cute, right? But I'm born in a tiny country called Denmark. Some of you might have heard of it. Yeah? Supposedly, yeah, you've come across it, yeah. We used to conquer you guys, right, in Sweden. Oh, I remember that, yeah. Yeah, you do that too. So the Danish Vikings, right, we all look like this. You seen the Vikings show? No, it's probably closest to that. Drinking too much beer, eating too much pizza, watching too much soccer, that's us. So yeah, we used to be the happiest country in the world. Now I think Norway took over. So we're pretty bummed about that. We're down to second place now. Still, funny little country, 5.5 million people. Grew up there, went to college, studied engineering, started my first two companies in Denmark, and then I'm not going to bore you with those. One of them crashed and burned fairly quickly due to co-founder issues, which is the number one reason startups fail. Another good reason to being a good communicator, because most startups really fail because people don't communicate well, or because people steal your money. The other company was sort of moderately successful, and I sold my share of that when I moved to Silicon Valley in 2010 to be part of the sort of startup ecosystem in the Bay Area. So I'm currently working on 2 tech startups, and then I have this company called Startup Experience, where I find that it's a good excuse to travel around, work with interesting, innovative people like yourselves. So I've done that in 25 countries, working with universities, startup accelerators, and also sometimes larger companies that are interested in employing sort of entrepreneurial principles to enhance their innovative or sort of innovation management capabilities. So enough about me. This is another way to sort of visualize myself. How many of you are on LinkedIn? Hopefully everyone here? No? Not quite. Okay, we have a couple of people who are not on LinkedIn. Are you familiar with LinkedIn? Yeah, but you chose that it's not valuable to you, or not yet? I might try to convince you otherwise tonight. So LinkedIn is sort of a professional version of Facebook, right? So you have your own profile on LinkedIn, and it's a great way to sort of manage all your connections. And you're getting started with this as soon as possible, even while being a student, is absolutely necessary in this day and age, because it's impossible to keep track on what everyone is doing. So somebody you meet in a course today might be doing something really interesting 5 years from now, and there's no way for you to know that. So the best way to keep track on your contacts is really on a platform like LinkedIn, or not like LinkedIn, use LinkedIn, because that's the biggest and most well-known platform. Everyone is on it, or most people in the professional world will be on it. So you can sort of keep track on all your professional connections, and then 2 years from now, when you might need a contact at a venture capital firm, or you need to talk to somebody at Microsoft and they're not responding to your emails, you type into LinkedIn Microsoft, and then all your first degree connections will pop up. It's like, wow, I had no idea my former classmate is now working at Microsoft. Maybe I can reach out to him or her and try to get an introduction. Or maybe you don't have any first degree connections, but then you have your second degree connections. So you can also see who your friends know. And then you can ask a friend to introduce you to some of their friends, right? So everything becomes very efficient. You can have a great visualization of everyone you know and everyone they know, and you can actually also see third degree connections now. So you very quickly are able to pretty much access anyone in the world. Have you heard the 6 degrees of separation, that theory? Right, that you basically have only 6 degrees between you and Mr. Trump, right? Maybe it's typically less. Like 6 degrees of separation from anyone pretty much in the connected world. And today, especially if you go to a place like San Francisco, it's typically 2 or 3 degrees of connections, right? And you have access to pretty much anyone very, very easily if you have an overview of who you know and who they know. Right, so I'd strongly recommend you to start using LinkedIn to keep track of your professional network. And we'll talk more about sort of how to manage that most efficiently. So this is a visualization. Unfortunately, they don't allow this API to happen anymore, but it used to be a couple of years ago, you could visualize your contacts. So this was my network in, I think, 2007, where they visualized all these different connections. So these are, I think the blue ones are all my university connections. And these are different notes in San Francisco, and then and you can sort of see how your contacts are also interconnected. So it's kind of a cool visualization. But again, so another way of describing me is look at who I know, right? Show me your network and I'll tell you who you are, right? You surround yourself with people that you aspire to become like, or at least that's a good technique if you're trying to become better in a certain area in life. You're trying to become more artistic, or you're trying to become better with money, maybe try to surround yourself with successful people. And then automatically they will start teaching you things, start inviting you to events, start helping you out in various ways and pulling you in that direction. And on the contrary, if you only surround yourself with people who are super depressed and anxious and scared of going out and scared of traveling, they will pull you in a different direction. Right? So also, one way of looking at how can I enhance my professional self would be to, well, try to surround yourself with people that are in that sphere, and then you'll be able to sort of pull yourself in that direction. So Silicon Valley is not just a place, it's also a state of mind where, as I mentioned before, people are very good at opening up their connections. For those of you who are not super familiar with Silicon Valley, it's like a hotbed for innovation, right? Why would entrepreneurs go to Silicon Valley? Why do they do that? Why would you do that?
Opportunities.
Opportunities, yeah. That comes from what? Connections, yes. So people are really good at helping each other out. You go into any coffee shop in San Francisco and people will be like, hey, could I buy you coffee and ask you a couple of questions? Because you seem to be in the customer segment I'm targeting with my startup, and I'd just love to get your feedback for a couple of minutes. Right? People do that, like random strangers. In Silicon Valley, people also realize that ideas are worthless. What do you think of that? A lot of people are afraid that somebody's going to steal your idea. Well, it turns out the idea itself is worthless. What matters is execution. How quickly and how effectively can you bring that idea to life? Was Google the first search engine? Was it? No. Was Facebook the first sort of social media platform? No. Was Twitter the first instant messaging tool? No. Right? So what matters is not the idea itself, it's how well you can execute on that idea. And it turns out the more people you talk to, the more input you're going to get. Every time you talk to a new person, you're going to get a new perspective. And somebody will open up a door for you. And hey, you should talk to my uncle who's the purchasing manager at Walmart. He might be able to give you some feedback on how you can get on the shelves in these retails and how you should consider your pricing or whatever it might be. Right? So it's completely unpredictable what might happen, and people in Silicon Valley are really good at that. They're just networking all the time and helping each other out. And they're good at not thinking about sort of what's in it for me, as I mentioned, because they believe in this sort of startup karma, that if I help you out, then maybe you can give me the same thing back. And I don't expect you to. But I believe that if I help you out, maybe somebody else in the ecosystem will be willing to help me. So sort of that kind of karma really pays back in one way or another. And on the flip side as well, when we talk about networking and your personal brand, Silicon Valley might seem like a really big place, just like Melbourne seems like a big city, but typically in the sort of inner circle in a city, everyone knows each other. So if you behave like a jerk, people are going to know about it, right? And employers talk to one another, and they're going to do background checks on you, right? And now it's easier than ever before to search on social media to check up on, well, what is your history? And the same with VCs. If you're ever interested in raising money for a startup, if you burned your connections before, you screwed them over one way or another, took their money and didn't deliver and didn't even try, it's okay to fail. Like Silicon Valley is absolutely a place it's okay to fail, but they will make sure that did you treat your partners with respect? Did you do your best? Did you work hard enough? Did you communicate well about what was going on? And if you haven't, if you screw over your employees and your investors and your colleagues, people will know about it, and it's a very networked community. So be careful about how you manage your personal brand and how people are going to talk about you later on as well. So yeah, this is what I sort of meant about how interconnected San Francisco is compared to many of these other hubs. The network is just like one big black dot that everyone knows each other. For those of you who are sort of looking at getting your first job out of college in the somewhat near future, networking also plays a really important role in that. The former sort of career escalator is jammed. It used to be that after graduating from a good university, you'd be able to step on to the career escalator, and then after a couple of jobs, after a couple of years, you might be promoted to project manager, department manager. You slowly sort of rise up the career escalator, and at the end of your career, you would become maybe VP or CEO of the company, right? And then you'll be able to step off the career escalator and enjoy your retirement. Does that sound appealing to anyone here? To work for the same company for the next 30 years? Maybe not so much, right? So maybe you want to have a completely different career path, and it's also no longer possible because a lot of people lost money in the financial crisis, and they now have to stay at the top of the escalator, which jams the whole thing the way down. The middle managers don't get promoted, and becomes difficult to get an entry-level job. So in today's day and age, we need to all be more entrepreneurial in the way we create opportunities for ourselves. How do we land those jobs? How do we create sort of an interesting, exciting life for ourselves? And that's typically through all these connections. So the most important startup of all is the startup of you. There's an excellent book by Reid Hoffman, actually the founder of LinkedIn, and his co-author Ben Kasnica, where they talk about how you can try to operate your own life and your own career as a startup. So just like any other startup, we need to be more agile and adaptable. The skills you're learning in school today will most likely be obsolete the day you graduate, or at least in the next 5 to 10 years, because things are just changing so much faster. Right? We have all these exponential technologies that are making the workplace transform at a faster and faster pace. So humanity will change more in the next 20 years than it has in the previous 300. Think about that. 300 years worth of change in 2 decades. So it's completely impossible for us as human beings to predict what life is going to be like, what resources will be necessary. I mean, talk about just one technology trend like self-driving cars will massively disrupt so many different industries. They talk about 20 to 30% of the entire workforce in the US will be disrupted just because of self-driving cars. And when we talk about AI and the types of skills or the types of jobs that artificial intelligence combined with quantum computers will be able to take over, we have a pretty scary scenario. But the only thing for sure is that we're going to have to update our own skills. We can't just rely on the education we got back in the days. We will need to constantly update our skills in order to not become obsolete. I know that's kind of a scary picture, but it's just reality that if you don't stay up to date and keep adapting to this constantly changing world, you will be outpaced by supercomputers and no longer relevant, no longer capable of creating value for society. So check out Startup of You. It's not just what you know, sort of, is how you are able to present that. So emotional intelligence is a huge part of creating meaningful connections with people. coming across as a likable, professional, well-behaved human being is insanely important in order to create those relationships where people want to employ you or recommend you to other people as well. So we're going to go through some exercises very soon. Yeah, we're jumping into that now. So we're all pitching all the time, especially if you decide to start your own business. Who are we pitching to?
Everyone around you.
Investors to get money? Yeah. Who else? Clients, customers, yeah, who might buy our products. Partners, yeah. You might need to sell yourself and your business idea in order to attract talented people to work with you and for you. There's a war on talent, right? So even also if you are employers, it's very important in order to attract the best talent to work for your division or inside a large corporation in order to get people to join your project group. It's a big part of it, and yeah? Suppliers, yes, to get the right partners set up, especially if you're a scrappy little startup and you're calling up some big manufacturing partner, they're going to be like, yeah, who are you, right? Well, you need to convince them that there's some value in this partnership so that they're willing to work with you even in the early days. So the moment you decide to be an entrepreneur, everything changes, and you'll need to, every coffee conversation, every time you're out for dinner, you're essentially pitching, because you never know who might overhear that conversation, and that could lead to a lot of interesting opportunities. So we'll talk about the elevator pitch now. What is an elevator pitch?
60 seconds of you.
60 seconds, yeah, that's fairly long elevator ride. But yeah, what is the goal of the elevator pitch? Get somebody hooked, yeah. Is it to get them to sign the check? To make them interested, right? So you basically have the first 10 seconds to get people hooked, to make them interested, to make people ask for more. Right? The goal is not for them to offer you the job in those 10 seconds or 30 seconds if it's a long elevator ride. Right? The goal is for them to reach in their pocket and hand you their business card. Right? And then you wait until the elevator door closes, and then you go, yes! I succeeded with my elevator pitch, because now I don't have 10 seconds, I have 20 minutes over coffee to convince this investor about that she should invest in my company, right? So that is really the objective with that elevator pitch. And the same goes at a networking event. It's just to get people hooked, not to talk a ton about yourself and blabble on and try to tell them everything about your life and your story and your company and what you're working on and what you need help with, but just say just enough to get them hooked, to make them curious. And that's also why we're now going to look into, well, what is your personal elevator pitch? And how can you get people hooked? So I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one by Mark Twain. Does that make sense? I didn't have time to write your short letter. Right? It's a lot harder to distill your entire vision about yourself or your job or whatever you might be trying to accomplish into this short, crisp sentence. It's much harder or much easier to just blabble on and try to tell people everything about yourself or everything about your company. But here we really only have so much time. So yeah, and try to stand out, try to be unique. Try to make yourself memorable. In a networking event where people are hoping to meet 20 to 30 new people, how do you want to be remembered and how are you going to be remembered? So be prepared with a punchy, memorable statement about who you are. So in this scenario that we're going to play out, essentially, what do people typically ask when you meet somebody, a random stranger at a networking event? You're standing with a beer or a glass of wine in your hand, or soda, whatever it is, and somebody comes over and says, hey, how's it going?
What do you do with yourself?
What are you doing?
Yeah, well, what do you do with yourself?
Yeah, what do you do with yourself? Or yeah, what are you working on, right? Or something like that. And what is the typical answer to that? Oh, I'm an accountant at KPMG, or yeah, I'm a consultant with Deloitte, or yeah, I have a desk job. I'm a third year law student at Deakin University. How exciting is that? Not that exciting, right? There are a million other people that have that exact same description. So how do you come up with something that's unique about yourself that people can remember? How do you reframe that, hey, I'm studying law, to saying, well, I'm trying to change the world or making it more changing humanity for the better in in a certain field, or I'm studying healthcare because I want to cure diseases and save millions of people, or I'm doing sports psychology because I believe athletes can do much better if we just help them do X, Y, and Z. Right? So there must be other ways of sort of presenting yourself. Another thing that's typically valuable is to have a couple of punchy things that people might find interesting about yourself. So what are the top 3 things that make you interesting? Right? It's not probably what you studied. It might not even be your current job, but it might be something related to your aspirations or your political views, or maybe that's a tricky one in terms of a networking context. Talking about politics and religion can be tricky, unless you really know what type of culture there is in this networking session. But what is it that makes you interesting? Are you a former aspiring race car Formula 1 driver? Or are you really into rock climbing or kiteboarding, or were you a ballet dancer, but then you broke your foot back in the days, and that could have happened? Like, what is unique about you and your story? So now we're going to do a little session here where you get a couple minutes to write down the opening sentence that you could use when somebody asks you, so, what do you do? Right? So of course you can touch on sort of what you're doing, but try to reframe that into a sentence that makes it really interesting and punchy. And at the same time, you could also write down 3 things that makes you unique that you could bring up in a natural way at some point during that conversation that people might find interesting. Sounds good? Let's try it. So 5 minutes right now. If you don't have paper and pen and paper, do you have it? Or you have your phones, you could use that too. So let's take a couple of minutes, write down the opening sentence, your personal elevator pitch. That's just really helpful to have this well rehearsed. So no matter who you meet, you will have that in the back of your mind, even though you get nervous about meeting this really accomplished professor or a very successful business person. You sort of know how to introduce yourself in a way where people are going to stop up and say, tell me more. Cool. You got your opening sentence right? Ready? Now you have to stand up and give it in front of everyone. No. But everybody stand up and come in here. I'm trying to get some alcohol in here for a little bit later so we can actually simulate a real networking scenario, right, to make it more realistic. So I've sent your head out, and hopefully that's going to happen. But right now we'll have to do it without alcohol. So we're going to do this little networking scenario where we're going to try to meet at least 3 people that you have never talked to before. Should be pretty easy in here. And then you're going to you're going to sort of ask the other person, so what do you do? Or, so what are you doing here? Or, how are you? Whatever you might ask a complete stranger at another networking event. And then you're going to try to deliver your opening sentence. And you can also, if you want to get feedback on the things that is unique about you, it could be where you're from, it could be what you're doing here, it could be some kind of former passion of yours, a current passion of yours, something interesting. You're an aspiring mountain climber, or whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be that you're a former Olympian. It could also be just whatever edgy sort of aspirations you might have. So let's try to do that. You get to meet 3 people. I'll time the interaction, so you have about 3-4 people with each person. So you deliver your opening sentence and maybe talk about the couple of things that you would like to potentially share about yourself that makes you unique and interesting, and then you get feedback from the other person. I was like, well, that's not unique at all. Find something better. Or, oh, wow, that sounds really interesting. Maybe you can tell me more about that in a different way, whatever it might be. And then the other person goes. Sounds good? 3, 2, 1, go. Another 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Great. So I can meet with you. Hi, how are you?
I'm Liz, how are you?
Great to meet you here, Liz. What are you doing at this great event?
Oh, I train sport horses, I'm studying accounting and management, and
Okay.
I'm aspiring to make the economy a better place.
That sounds
based on
amazing.
business.
Okay,
What about you?
so you're studying accounting?
Yes,
Oh, okay. Here, where?
at Deakin here.
At Deakin. What do you like about that?
I love numbers, always have, and something, you know, that I can solve an equation, it makes me feel awesome.
Yes.
I want to apply that to a business.
So why did you decide to go into study accounting?
Initially, I was studying business management, which I had done since high school.
Yep.
And then I thought I want to expand on that. So I thought I'll just go into numbers. You know, I've always liked numbers. So
Yeah.
I
Okay.
was doing that last year.
And then you also train horses, you said.
Horses, yeah. I have trained horses for most of my life. And all the Western sports, everything, chasing cows.
Okay. Yeah. What are you looking for to sort of advance your career at this point?
Right now, I get the degree finished and everything. Get placement. I'm trying to land a first job as well outside of college.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And what would that dream job sort of look like?
In the absolute ideal world,
Yeah.
it would be like administrator, auditor, economic strategist.
Economic strategist? Okay, at a larger company or a small company?
Preferably larger. Yes.
Okay. Here in Geelong area, Melbourne
Probably
area?
anywhere but Geelong.
Okay.
I've been wanting for years to get out of Geelong.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So somewhere else?
But
Oh,
even
right.
like working in the Reserve Bank of Australia or something, that's really
Okay. Okay, we'll try to switch if you're already ready. Otherwise, you can finish the conversation there. Good. Yeah. So think about what the ask is like in the conversation too. Like, what are you trying to accomplish and find out in that conversation? Let's make sure you don't get stranded with me again. Or maybe that's already too late. Shahed, you're gonna jump in here because we're an uneven number. Hey.
I really like the environment, but I really enjoyed the project. I wanted to create work, and I kind of found it interesting.
Cool. How did that go? Seems like the conversations went fairly smooth. Did you get better at it every time? Yes? Were the other people any interesting, or were they all? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, that's good.
very interesting.
Did you find like you had a more interesting way of introducing yourself now after this, or yeah, you changed the way you would introduce yourself? Yeah. Okay. Good. So now we're going to jump into a couple of other aspects of what it means to sort of present yourself. And I'd like you. There's an excellent presenter here. I'd just like you to carefully analyze sort of the way he presents. This is just a short speech, but see if there's anything in this. Otherwise excellent presentation that could be slightly improved. So check this out.
So I'm really pleased to be here today to show you some of the new things we've built into the operating system for new services. And I'm really excited to see so many people here to talk about it, for me to talk to about it today. And one of the things I like about what I do is I get to play with great technology, and I really like that.
Yeah. So he's clearly really passionate about his job, right? No? A few things, a few details. You don't feel like that message comes across?
Not overly.
What's wrong?
Seems like he's forcing himself to be there.
Body language. Okay, so there's a bit of a disconnect between what he says and what he's doing.
He's totally uncomfortable in my end.
He's uncomfortable, yeah. So somebody took the geekiest dude from the dark corners in the engineering department and pulled him up on stage. Yeah, yeah. And what makes you say that? So body language is not ideal. Why? Okay, so closed body language.
No eye contact. It looks like during
Yeah, so he's looking down, no eye contact, yeah. And that makes him seem less confident and less...
Yeah, much less.
Okay.
A bit intimidating.
Not very engaging? In what way?
He's very closed off and he's looking down, so
Yeah,
it's like even though he says he cares,
yeah.
it appears he doesn't.
It doesn't come across at all. Yeah, okay.
Monotone.
Very monotone tone. Yeah, absolutely, that as well. Okay, so interestingly enough, let's check out another example here. Actually from the same company, but a slightly different approach. Check this out. Oh. Gotta love this guy.
I have 4 words for you. I love this company. Yes!
So slightly different approach. I'm not sure I recommend you do exactly this at a networking event or when you're presenting your startup at an angel forum or something like that. But what's different about this?
Very overdone.
What's that?
Very overdone. He's screaming all over the stage.
Yeah. What do you? What kind of connection? Like, how do you perceive
My
Steve?
first instinct is to run. There is a crazy person in the room.
So it's run away?
Yeah,
Or?
just run away.
Yeah. So it's too crazy, overly dramatic, overly. Yeah. But what else? Do you believe that he is passionate about this company?
I think he enjoys working in the company.
He might enjoy working for the program. Yeah.
At least it makes you listen. You want to see.
It makes you listen, right? Because it's. Yeah. He might say something. Yeah, exactly. So it makes you listen. It makes you pay attention. It might be overly crazy, and you also feel like, wow, this guy is way over the top too much. But it definitely gets you hooked somehow, right? Not much. Yeah. No, he doesn't care at all. And there's an audience here of thousands of people, by the way, right?
Can I just add?
Yes.
That he was the chief executive officer of Microsoft at the time, I think. So very different from the engineer that before was talking about his very small project to talking about this was the launch of Windows 98. I think that was, and that's why he was like that. So
Yeah.
it's that.
But that engineer might be the lead engineer in his field. But yeah, I get your point, right? Yeah, the stage is certainly different conditions, and we have a CEO here who's very confident, but the current CEO would never do this type of performance, right? So it's very much a personality thing. So I'm not saying you have to be like Steve Ballmer, but when you're about to get on stage or you're about to enter a room in a networking setting, try to have a little bit of Steve Ballmer mentality, right? If you don't believe in yourself and that you have something great to offer, or you're about to go to a job interview and you feel like, oh, you're begging them for the job, it should be the other way around, right? Or if you're pitching your startup to investors, you also need to be confident. It's like, this is an amazing opportunity for them to invest in your company, right? And if they don't invest, they're going to lose out, like they're going to miss out, because this train is leaving and it's about to getting on now or not. This is about hiring me now, otherwise your competitor might do it, and you're going to miss out. So having some of that drive, some of that passion for what you do and what you're working on, if you don't believe in yourself, no one else will either, right? That's the truth. So you got to have some of that confidence, even though, especially as an entrepreneur, those of you who are starting your own business, we all know that in the back of our minds, we know that our main client just left us. Our head of engineering is about to quit. We're running out of cash pretty soon, and if we don't get this investment, we're in kind of a pickle, right? So all that is going on in the back of our minds, but when we get up on stage, we have all the confidence in the world. Not becoming like an arrogant prick, but definitely confident in what we're doing, what we're bringing to the table, the value we can create. Otherwise, you will miss out. So that's really important in terms of any type of presentation and when you're presenting yourself. What affects the audience? Like, what aspects of your presentation do people care about the most? Or what is perceived?
Your presence.
Your presence, yeah.
And mark your
Is it the verbal or the nonverbal?
nonverbal.
It's nonverbal. Okay, so not just what you say, it's how you say it, right? Nonverbal, of course, these numbers are not completely accurate, but about 50% or maybe over 50% of what people remember and how they perceive you is completely nonverbal. Has nothing to do with the words you choose and how you say them. Then we have the voice, the tonation, how you carry yourself, the way you communicate it. That's also super important. And then about 10% or less than 10% is actually the words you choose. And that's what we care so much about when we're preparing a speech or we're writing something. Or obviously in writing it's a little bit different, but when we're trying to write a speech or trying to prepare for a presentation, we spent, am I right? We spent 95% or sometimes 100% of the time just rewriting that speech. How many hours do you spend in front of the mirror or video recording yourself? Not that many, right? But that's actually what matters for the perception of people. How people will perceive you is not the words you choose, it's how you carry that out, how you communicate it. So we need to be good at that. We need to be good at our body language. The body talks. It's not just what we say, it's how we say it. We have these things called hands, right? I took some of you, I went over and pulled your hands out of your pockets before. They tend to do a lot of things if we don't pay attention to them, especially if we get a little nervous. Right? So they will start becoming very distracting. Some of you have Italian roots, yeah? No? They will start becoming very distracting, right? And that can be very hard to concentrate on what you're saying if your arms are all over the place. Or maybe you feel like, oh, this is a great thing, I'll just put them in my pocket, right? Some of you. This is very comfortable. What is not great about having hands in your pockets? What happens to my posture? It's terrible, right? Terrible posture when you have your hand in your pocket. And it doesn't give the impression that, I mean, kind of careless, right? You're not really serious about this, not that committed, not that passionate. Maybe I was a little bit arrogant too, right? I don't really care about you, it's kind of laid back, not really paying that much attention. And then some people have like keys or coins in your pockets, start playing around with that on stage. Not a great idea to do that on stage, no. So keep your hands out of your pockets, right? And also not behind you, walking around like a general. Also doesn't look so great. Having them crossed in front of you, closed body language, not the best. So what we're trying to do is find a comfortable place somewhere above your waist where you can keep those hands under control, right? It's really whatever you like. And then you can use them to show something on a slide, or you can use them while you're talking and not going too crazy. And then you come back to that comfortable position and they're somewhat under control. Right? Then you also avoid scratching your hair or your ears or your nose or whatever you might otherwise do if they're not under control. Of course, eye contact is really a powerful tool when you're especially giving a presentation. You want to try to pay attention to all the different corners in the room. If I only talk to you, they're going to feel left out very quickly, and vice versa. If you're doing a presentation and you don't like having actual direct eye contact, some people get uncomfortable with that. Just look people in the forehead. They think that you're looking them in the eyes and they get the same connection, but you're really just looking in the forehead. So that's a little trick. It's harder one-on-one, then they will sort of see that, hey, why are you staring at? That's odd. So there are a couple of things around that. Have you heard of this technique called power posing? Does it ring a bell? Yeah? Remember what it is?
No, I watched it in a TED Talk.
Yeah, there's a TED Talk by this Harvard professor who'd done research. It's later on been somewhat debunked, but I still believe there's a lot of truth to it. So this Harvard professor found that you can become, or you will be, 30% more convincing if you've done some type of power pose prior to entering a networking session or a presentation or an examination, something like that. And a power pose, what is that? Remember?
I remember before I did a speech, I was told,
Yeah.
I watched that and I went in front of the mirror.
Yeah.
Just stand like that, like you can do it, or say something.
Yeah.
To feel confident. I think it helped.
Did it work? Yeah, to some extent. So it can be taking some kind of powerful positions. Typically these are sort of super masculine positions, either like sitting on a chair with your arms above your head, like power positions, right? Or like the superwoman or power woman pose like this. What I typically like is to have the hands above my head. But try to stand up, everyone, for a second here. And then try to have your arms just like kind of hanging down the side. Do you feel like you can change the world? Think you're the best one in your field right now? Maybe not. Try to take your hands above your head. Try to snap your fingers like this. And this is going to be uncomfortable. On the count of 3, we're going to scream as loud as we can. Yes, yes, yes. Nobody can hear you here. We're not video recording or anything like that. You ready? On the count of 3. 3, 2, 1. Yes, yes, yes. How do you feel now? Those who actually did it are smiling right now. Right, what happened was that we have a massive drop in your cortisol level, the chemical in your brain that makes you nervous, anxious, depressed, feeling insecure. And we have a massive boost in testosterone, what makes you confident, aggressive, and ready to attack the world. Right? So doing some kind of power pose prior to entering a networking event will give you that extra spike of energy, and people can perceive that. People can see that you're more energetic, you're more sort of, you're on fire, and people get attracted to that, right? So if you're doing this before doing a big presentation, make sure you're actually behind the curtain, okay? It has a totally different effect if people in the audience have seen you, oh, I'm awesome, and the microphone is on, right? Different effect, so make sure that's not the case. Thank you. Yeah, well, actually, while you're standing, so power posing can be one powerful technique to sort of change the perception, hands out of the pockets. Thank you, sir. Another thing that I saw demonstrated by a couple of people here is that when you're talking to somebody or you're giving a presentation and you might be a little bit nervous, you might try to say, well, this is a great time for me to demonstrate how much I can sort of wrap my legs around one another, right? See, I can actually stand like this. I look particularly stupid when I do it, but you don't look that great either, right? And specifically the girls, typically, that tend to do this. Why is this not great? Some of you can look somewhat decent while doing it, but you have to allocate significant amount of brain power on just staying upright, right? I can barely even do it. And then you also have to think about what you're saying. So much better to sort of have shoulder-wide space between your legs, everyone. Now you can sort of lean forward. You can lean back to the left, to the right. Some people don't know, that's okay. But now we have a pretty good understanding of our balance boundaries. You don't need to think about standing upright. I can just stand here, I take a deep breath. I feel like there's a wire pulling up my chest because I'm proud of what I'm presenting. I'm either talking about my business or this project. I'm talking about myself, my own skills. So I'm proud of what I'm presenting. I have this kind of body readiness. Maybe I lean a little bit forward. It makes me feel more confident and makes me feel more enthusiastic about whatever I'm talking about. So thank you very much. This is a technique called grounding, where you sort of have your feet in with a good space between them, so you don't need to think about standing upright. And you take that deep breath, and then you feel grounded. You feel like way more confident, and you can just concentrate about what you're saying instead of trying to stay upright while having some kind of weird position. So that's a couple of tricks in relation to body language. Any other things that you've come across in terms of body language? That either some of your own tics or something you notice other people do that's really annoying? Hand on the throat?
Everyone, well, maybe everyone knows this. This is the most vulnerable point on the human body.
Yeah.
When people are nervous and they start playing with necklaces or
Fiddling with stuff?
the neck.
Yeah. And the stomach as well. All right, yeah. Yeah. Somebody else notice? No? Yeah, feel your beard. Yeah. And it can also be somewhat distracting, right, when you've done that for 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, I'll take the ring in and out. Yeah. All these fiddly things that becomes, or if you have a pen, you stand there kind of clicking it constantly. Oh yeah, wow, that sounds really interesting. Have you tried other things? Okay, yeah. But it's really annoying little tics we have. And then all these kinds of ums and ahs and like those are things you can also get rid of with a little bit of practice. But yeah, those were a couple of kind of tips and tricks in relation to body language. And this really makes a difference in the way the audience will perceive you and how interesting you will appear in a networking session as well. Storytelling. Are you using that in your everyday lives? Yeah? We kind of have, human beings have these two types of memory. Like we have short-term memories like cache on a computer. When new stuff comes in, you need to get rid of some of the old stuff. And then you have the big hard drive where you can store things forever. But in order to get stored to that big hard drive of the audience, make your pitch or make your presentation or make your story more memorable, you sort of need people to connect to what you're saying at an emotional level. Right? They need to see themselves in that position, feel the pain, or relate to your story in one way or another. Visualize it inside their heads. Then they will store your presentation forever. Right? So if you can be more personal, tell people a story that illustrates the example of why you care about what you're doing today. Like, tell me a story about why you went into studying whatever you're studying or whatever that might be. It'll be much more interesting, yeah.
I just had a round of 3 job interviews, and the comments that came back was around my storytelling, and that what put me above all the other candidates was purely around being able to tell a story and tie people in. Because what happened, and what the people for Norway, so obviously there's some issues with English and trying to being Australian, but it was around bringing that back because it brought them along for the journey, and where they started to waver, the story then brought them back, because it connected with something that they'd had in their past, and it was really interesting for that storyteller that's what brought them along on that journey.
Yeah.
When they got lost, losing them.
Very good. Yeah, great example. So it can be a really powerful way of sort of tying in your story and who you are and what you want to try to accomplish, and also your past achievements, right? A lot of job interviews will also be about, well, tell me about a tough problem that you tackled or that you had to overcome. How did you deal with that? Like, what were the different aspects? What made the difference? Like, so a lot of employers will ask you these sorts of questions in that process too. Great, so now we're going to jump into a couple of do's and don'ts in relation to networking. These are kind of fun. The first one is related to business cards. How many of you have business cards? Okay, so about 4 people in here. Great. Why don't you have a business card? You're students, so what? You didn't get one yet. But you know you can print these things for like $10, right? Yeah, so that might not be an excuse. But I totally understand. I didn't have a business card as a student. Well, I had for my student job maybe. But business cards can be a great way to just connect with people. I know it's sort of old school to connect with people on a piece of paper, but just at a networking event, it's such an easy way to connect, because it can be a little bit awkward when you pull out your phone, you start getting other notifications, and you also seem distracted. So some people connect over LinkedIn right there on the spot, but typically it's better to just hand them that business card and you can take a couple of notes on that card. And then what I do is, like, after I have come home from this networking event, I have this stack of business cards, and then I start linking up with people and writing personal notes when I connect with them and all that stuff, right? So get a business card, guys. It's really easy. You don't have to just write student. Try again also here to make yourself stand out, right? So write something interesting. It's like, yeah, great, you're a second year law student, that's good, but you're trying to change the world of whatever industry, or you're an inspiring lawyer or hoping to get a job in X industry, right? Something that makes people remember, oh yeah, okay, there was this person trying to accomplish this and that. And you don't need to spend $500 on business cards. Some people like to get these sort of silver-coated titanium or carbon-reinforced business cards. Don't do it, right? It's just a pain in the ass, because then people get these fancy business cards that are like unbreakable and really heavy. It's like, what am I going to do with this? Like, it doesn't fit in my wallet and in my business card holder. It's fine if you want to like have a rounded edge instead of the sort of sharp one. That's fine. You can have a little bit of graphics on it, but it's absolutely not necessary. It doesn't have to be super fancy. And definitely don't do what some people do. It's like, oh, great, I'm going to come up with some really innovative form, then people are going to love me. So I will make my business cards half size. So annoying, because they don't fit into any wallet, right? Or I'm going to try to make like micro print and then make it a tiny little square. Guess what? That business card is going to get lost, right? So don't try to be too smart and cheeky and innovative when it comes to business cards. Just have a business card. Maybe don't do that unless you're the old cool grandma going to a gaming conference. Think a little bit about your appearance as well. And for the guys, again, depending on where you're going, think about what kind of attire you're wearing. It can be very distracting as well if you're either overly dressed up, especially in a place like Silicon Valley where the most successful people are wearing hoodies, right? So you don't want to come in like the sharpest penguin suit. The suit is just not gonna, it's gonna make you stand out in an awkward way. But on the flip side, if I'm at a networking event in New York City with investment bankers, I don't want to come in my hoodie, right? Because that's gonna be really weird, and then I'm gonna stand out. So try to sort of gauge what is the level here. Yeah, for the ladies, maybe also think about something appropriate. What is the perception of people? How do you want to be perceived by the audience? So think a little bit about that. Don't, wow, that's interesting. So again, nothing too tempting for the male audience, can be very distracting. Wear clothes that actually fit you in a perfect way. And then I mostly included this slide for the guys because we're always really curious, like, what is casual business? I don't know, but now you have it. So this is for everyone's entertainment. Name tags, that's always fun, right? Get these awkward name tags. Some people can be really creative about it and try to do all kinds of artistic stuff on it. Think about where you place that name tag too, especially for the women as well. If you don't like people looking at your breasts, maybe not place it here. And definitely don't touch people's name tags. That's just awkward. Don't do that. Then we get into sort of like I don't know what's going on here. Sort of the art of starting those conversations in the first place. Maybe I broke everything now, or maybe not. Okay, we hope this will work. How do you enter the conversation? This is typically what a networking session looks like, right? You enter the room and people are talking all over the place. They look like they're all best friends already. They know each other from back in the days, and you're like the odd one out, not having anyone to talk to. First thing first, really important to have done that power pose prior to entering the room, or at least thinking about yourself in a positive way. Having a positive self-image is really crucial. If you come into that room thinking, oh, you're the underdog, you're not that interesting, nobody's probably going to find me interesting and want to talk to me, then people are going to be way less inclined to go over and talking to you. If you come in there and you're smiling, you're positive, you feel confident, then you're going to automatically attract many more people to come to you. So also think about the first thing, or the most important thing when you're entering these networking sessions, just get the first conversation started right away, right? Don't hesitate. You don't have to come up with something super brilliant, right? It doesn't have to be overly intelligent what you say to break the ice in these conversations. Everyone is there to network, so you can comment on the food or the venue, or you can just say, hey, I don't think we met yet, right? And that's a great, now you're automatically in a conversation. And you won't be like the person who's like circulating the walls, not being able to break into any conversation. The handshake. Do you have a good handshake? You don't know? Why don't we test it out? Like a good. Do you all know what a bad handshake is, right? Yeah, the really kind of dead cold fish, right? Oh, it's so annoying, right? You just immediately get a bad impression of this other person. Yeah, have clean hands when you go to a networking event. Have a somewhat confident handshake, but also not, what did you say? Too firm, right? We also know that semi-drunk uncle that always like the bone crusher. It's like, I'm going to show you how strong I am. That's also not a good way to do it. But try not to be too vague and not too strong. Let's actually give each other a little bit of feedback on handshakes. Everyone get up, give out 10 handshakes, and give each other feedback on how it felt. You look each other in the eye. You introduce yourself. Hi, how's it going? I'm Henrik. Nice to meet you. Very good handshake, Alec. Hey, how's it going? Really nice to meet you. Hi, good to meet you. How's it going, buddy?
Oh, no.
That's good, right? Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Hello.
No, that's not good? You don't like that?
No,
that's good. Good. All righty. Okay, cool. How are we going on Shahad?
Didn't plan anything.
No, but could we get it?
Did check with her.
But is there a cantina open?
I'll go check.
Okay, just get like 3 6-packs.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, cool. Okay, so that's a little bit on handshakes. Smile, be positive, right? That's really important. Like, a networking event is not your time to vent about your angry spouse. It's just not a good place to do it. People don't want to hear about it. That's not why they come to a networking event, to complain about their life and how miserable they are. It's like, everyone is going to try to escape that conversation as quickly as possible. And the interesting thing about smiling and being positive is that you will function like a magnet to everyone else. Like the people at the conference who are like smiling and open and positive, and they will automatically sort of people can see they're energetic and positive, and other people will get attracted to that conversation. Another thing you can do is sort of try to act as a host. So even though you're not the host of the event, but you can be the ones, when you're standing and you're talking to a couple of people, you can be the one who are opening up by your body language and your sheer appearance, opening up to bring other people into that circle. In relation to sort of breaking into, well, we're actually going to talk about it in a second. So be positive and smile, but be careful with how you're smiling. So maybe look yourself in the mirror before. And the guys especially, like, make sure your zipper is up, right? Your shirt is not sticking out. There's nothing worse than coming home from a 2-hour networking event and you find like, oops, I should probably have checked that prior to going. Giving versus getting or receiving, sort of related to how you exploit your connections. So when you start building your network and you have hundreds or maybe thousands of connections, some of those connections will be really valuable, really high-end connections of yours. But really, and depending on the degree of how well you know people, there's a natural limit to how many favors you can ask before you start giving back. And there's a typical mistake people make when they go to a place like San Francisco. They might know 1 or 2 people and they just start asking for favors. And they don't pay it back. They don't make the local person feel, this is really annoying, isn't it? Feel appreciated. Is this one? Yeah. Let's try here. Same. I might shut it off if it's so annoying. It keeps doing it. Okay, I'm gonna shut it off. So it's really important that you sort of have an understanding of this balance of how many favors have I asked this person now versus how much have I been giving back. What are ways you can give back to anyone and make people feel appreciated? So maybe you can't deliver the same amount of high-level connections to this person. So what would be other ways of showing appreciation?
Connect them to other resources that could assist them or people.
Yeah. So you're thinking about what would be valuable for this person and connecting them. Maybe you meet somebody that they could benefit from knowing. Yeah. Other ways?
Take it to basics and take them to dinner.
Maybe you invite them out for dinner. Yeah. Make them feel appreciated by a small gesture like that.
Do more than what it is they're asking for. So, like, for example, I have a dude that wants me to promote his events. So, like, he asked me to just share them around. So what I did was I shared them at a higher capacity or like more of an extent than he wanted to.
Yeah, so whenever that person finally asks for something, then really go over the top to pay back. Yeah. Then some people might be government contacts or they're in a capacity at their job where they're not allowed to receive gifts. What can you do there? Show gratitude? What's that? Yeah, that would be one way of doing it. Yeah. But that would be another way, sort of. So what I like to do when you have, what's that? Flowers, yeah, but even that can actually be tricky for certain people. But what's sort of free to receive is a thoughtful, introduction or a thoughtful recommendation for a book or an article you just read, and say, hey, this was related to this interesting conversation we had about self-driving cars. I felt like you might feel this would be valuable to you, or I just heard this really interesting podcast. I think you would find that valuable, right? So showing gratitude in the form of, hey, I thought of you for this, right? Other people where you can send gifts, like send them a book or send them something like that. It's like a relatively small gesture, but I really feel appreciated when I get something like that, right? So that could be a good way of doing it. Thinking long-term instead of short-term. So you might meet your ideal employer at this networking event, but maybe the best strategy isn't to ask them for a job right there on the spot. So try to sort of build that relationship initially and maybe spend the entire evening only talking about whatever sports they're passionate about or whatever else might be relevant to them, and start slowly building that relationship. And then over time, you'll be able to get closer to the ask when you're asking for that job position, or you're asking for that introduction, or you're asking for help with this big project of yours, or whatever it is. So thinking long-term can be very beneficial in terms of building those relationships. Listen more than you talk. So this is a really big one, right? People typically come to a networking event, they're armed with their opening statement, and they're ready to just attack and talk about themselves. Well, it turns out that everyone else in that session, they also love talking about themselves. The number one favorite topic of conversation is you, right? It's us. We love to hear our own names, and we love to talk about ourselves. So if you can make this other person talk about him or herself, they would feel like they had the best conversation of their lives. Oh, this is amazing. It was so interesting to talk to you because I got to blabble on about myself all night. Right? That's how people work. So if you can ask them some interesting questions, and maybe, oh, have you thought about this? Or how did you get to work on what you're working on? Oh, wow, thanks for asking. That's a great question. Now I'll tell you all my entire life story. Had the best conversation of my life. Right? So they feel like, oh, you had a great connection because you allowed them to talk about themselves. The other thing this does, especially if you start out asking questions about them and some interesting questions, right? You can even also prepare a couple of interesting questions. Maybe you read up on a couple of individuals that you're trying to meet that night. So especially for networking, you can be much more strategic about the way you network with people if you've done your homework in advance. Right, so typically they will send you a list of attendees for this networking session or this conference, and then you can start targeting the people you really want to meet for a specific purpose. And you can, if you really want to be good at this, and you're trying to get in touch with somebody that you know will be a relatively high-profile person at this conference, so they're going to be surrounded with people who want to talk to them, do your homework and figure out what they're passionate about. Are they really passionate about beer breweries, microbreweries, or are they really passionate about wine or golf or mountain climbing or race cycling or whatever it might be, right? Find out what are their hobbies and maybe read up on those sports results or read up on the latest development in that sector. Then you will have some kind of common ground and you can establish a different type of relationship like instantly. So you ask about that, and that will, people will automatically jump into talking about their favorite hobby. And they will favor you over somebody else who's just trying to pitch their business about themselves. So and now we're getting closer to the manipulation, right? And figuring out, well, what are people's interests? But honestly, it's just extremely effective. Like, if you know what people like, they would love to talk about that, right? If somebody comes up, no matter who it is, and I'm a pretty passionate kiteboarder, right? And people start talking about kite surfing and kite surfing spots, and I will favor that person, right? We're so vulnerable and so easy to manipulate in that way that finding that common ground, and also if you're talking to a stranger whom you don't know yet, again, asking a couple of questions early on in the conversation will allow you to get those insights because they will reveal it themselves. They will talk about themselves, what they're interested in, what they're doing, and now you will start be able to connect the dots. And say like, wow, okay, you're also interested in horseback riding. My sister is actually, the champion in Denmark in that or whatever, right? So now you all of a sudden have a way to connect with that person at a much more personal level. So asking them questions first will allow you to get those insights. Okay, be fully present. This is a dangerous one, right? In this day and age, we are always connected digitally. We always have our phones in our hands, but it's kind of an insult if you're having a 3-minute conversation with somebody and you can't stop texting at the same time, right? It's not just your phone. It can also be like, while we're having a conversation, I'm also, oh yeah, no, that sounds interesting. Yeah, scanning the room, are there anyone in here that could be more interesting to talk to, right? That's also pretty insulting, and I hate that, right? When you're talking to someone, you can just see they're kind of scanning the room if there's anyone more interesting. So it's better to be then fully present for those 3 minutes or 5 minutes of conversation, and then apologize if you really need to take your phone or check it, or just you're not interested in that conversation. Then better to then shut it off and say, oh yeah, finish your beer, I have to head up to the bar. Right? That's the other thing about the best way to start a conversation is at the bar. Right? Everyone there is typically there to refill the drinks. That's a very easy entry point. So every time you go to an event, if you're looking to pick up the first conversation, head straight for the bar. Right? That's a very easy place to talk to somebody. There are different personality types. How many of you have done sort of personality tests, personality type assessments? Okay, some of you. So there are many different tools. This one is MBTI, Myers-Briggs type indicator tool. Has 16 core types, and it talks about whether you are an extrovert or an introvert, whether you're sensing or intuition, whether you're thinking or feeling, and whether you're sort of more disorganized and good at navigating in chaos, or whether very sort of structured in your life. So they're based on all these different parameters, it generates these 16 different types. And it turns out we're actually very different. And 16 types is, of course, at all not representative of how many different types we are or that exist in the world. And you can't just put anyone into a perfectly fitting box. But definitely by learning about some of these different preferences, you will start also being able to understand who you're talking to. And if you're talking to a group of super introverted engineers, and you're an extroverted salesperson, you might want to downplay that a little bit, right? Because typically human beings like to connect with people that are similar to ourselves. So there's a technique called mirroring. This actually happens automatically. And maybe you've seen this at certain networking events or in any kind of conversation. People tend to mirror the other person just naturally, right? So if we're talking like this, I will also eventually start doing this and clicking my pen or having the arm on the same. I saw people that are standing here and they would both start mirroring themselves, mirroring the other person. It comes very natural. But if you're aware of this, you can also do it proactively. So you're looking at this other person, and to make them feel confident and comfortable, you can try to mirror their appearance. Mirror their sort of tonation, tone of voice, the way they behave. Are they really calm? Are they very loud and energetic? Right? So if you are super introverted and you're talking to somebody who's super energetic, maybe you want to up your game a little bit and try to appear a little more energetic than you usually would do. And vice versa. If you're a very energetic person, you're talking to a pretty quiet crowd, or a pretty quiet person, you don't want to come across as too sort of overly excited, because they're not going to feel comfortable with that, and they're not going to connect with you as well. Good. Take action. So that's around, the networking session doesn't stop after the networking event is over. It stops when? No beer. That's the worst. Okay, sorry guys, not tonight. Well, we can maybe head to a bar later on and do some actual networking. So taking action. When does the networking event stop? What's that?
Once you get your goal.
Once you get your goal? Yeah, maybe, right? But what else? No other comments? So it doesn't stop when the event is over, right? It stops. Well, hopefully it never really stops. Hopefully you created some meaningful connections that you will continue to work on for the rest of your life. But at least it doesn't stop before you've connected with these people. So after you come home, you have a pile of 15, 20 business cards that you now need to connect with, right? So that's where we either write an email to this person saying, hey, it was really great meeting you tonight. I really enjoyed our conversation about golf or whatever you might have talked about. I would love to link up with you on LinkedIn for future opportunities. Right? So that's how you send an email or in a connection on LinkedIn, or if they don't have LinkedIn, you can send them an email. Because now you have a thread of some kind of interaction. So if someone, at some point later in time, you need to connect with that person, you can search through their email inbox for that name, and then they will pop up and you can re-answer that email. Then they will see that, oh, okay, we already met at this time and we already had some kind of connection. And the same on LinkedIn. Always, always, always add a personal note when you're linking up with somebody on LinkedIn, right? Because your acceptance rate will increase 1,000%. Especially if you're linking up to really busy people that have a big network already. They will not accept you if you just send them a LinkedIn connection request if they don't remember you. Maybe you do this too late. So take action, follow up either the same evening or the day after, so people are still fresh in their memory about who you were, what you talked about. Just get that done, right? Link up on LinkedIn, then you have them up there, and you can always follow up again. Couple different mistakes on networking. Yeah, and then we have another little exercise. So name dropping is a big one. So you try to seem more important than you are by explaining who you might know or whom you've bumped into. It's like, oh yeah, no, that's funny you say that. It's just about, it reminds me of the other day when I was at this cafe and I was just talking to Mark Zuckerberg, and we're just having a blast. And it's completely irrelevant out of the context, but I was just trying to name drop somebody important to seem more important, right? Don't do that. If you have a great, valuable network, fine, and maybe people will find out about that at some other point in time, and that will give you some credibility. But if you're name dropping just for the sake of, making yourself seem more important, that's not going to work. Talking too much, kind of self-explanatory. Talking about yourself being asked, Not knowing when to end a conversation, that's a big one. There's also another one in regards to the handshake, right? Those people who will come and say, oh yeah, how's it going? And then they grab your hand with the other hand. And now you're screwed, right? Because now they got you. It's like, oh, wow, it's amazing to meet you. It's so great to really, let's talk more about the weather, right? Or some of these people, when they finally get locked into a conversation, and they have a hard time picking up another conversation. So now they will try to stay with you as long as possible. Even though you've exhausted any interesting topics at all, they will just keep talking about the weather or sort of, talking about completely other irrelevant topics just to stay in that one conversation. So if you sense that the other person is starting to look around or look at their phone, or even though you might have more to talk to that person about, it's better to just end it, right, in a way before it becomes really humiliating. And the same goes with asking for a follow-up when it's not deserved, right? When you feel like that conversation just didn't go that well. I don't have a really good connection with this person. It didn't seem like they were that interested in me. There might not be any point in asking for their business card. Because why would you need that business card? Like, I only want to link up with people that I feel I can ask a favor from, right? So that's like sort of my own way of looking at whether I'm going to connect with them or not, is whether or not I feel like I could reach out to that person and ask for a favor. If I can't do that, then why would I link up with them? There's no point in having, a network of 2,000 people if you can't utilize that network. So, and being too professional, too unprofessional. What is being too professional? How can you be too professional?
Being a politician in a room of very casual type people?
Tell me more. Like, how are you being a politician?
Well, I'm thinking, if the Prime Minister or something came into the room and you tried to have connect with all of us or what have you.
Yeah.
Something like that, you just think, mate, like, why are you here?
Oh, okay. So if you're too important. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, yeah. Other examples?
Keep talking about your job or something that you do and you just completely avoid any other topic or something that they might be interested in.
Yes. So people don't really care about what you do, right? But they might care about you as a person and what you care about, what you want to do with your life, what you're passionate about. Yeah, so that's a great example. If you only talk about your job and what you do in a professional way, you might not create real personal relationships. Right? So if people can get a sense for who you are as a person, and you're starting to be opening up at a personal level, but what you're struggling with, what are you aspiring to do, then people will care much more. So yeah, and being too unprofessional, what example is that at a networking session? Hands in pockets, yeah. What's that? Swearing too much, yeah. Yes, right, they're typically free bars at these networking events, right? That's like a really dangerous one. So don't go up there and get super slammed. That image will stay in people's minds forever if you're that drunk guy or girl at the event. Okay, so how to enter a conversation? Have you had any sort of? Do you have any what do you do when you get into a room full of people that are already talking? What type of conversations would you try to enter?
How bad was the weather on Monday?
Okay, so talk about some random topic. Yeah. Ask them why they're here, yeah. 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 And the best place to pick up a conversation is where? At the bar? Yeah, exactly. But sometimes what about, is there no one at the bar? Well, you can talk to the bar man or the bar woman if there's someone like that and just wait around. But maybe there are groups of people standing around the room and it can be kind of tricky to join a conversation. Typically, there are 2 or 3 people talking to one another. What's easier to break into a conversation of 2 people or 3 people? 3, maybe. It kind of depends, right? 2, yeah. It depends what you sense. It's very much sort of feeling that body language of the people. If you see a group that's like really engaged in a one-on-one conversation, maybe he just proposed to this girl, that might not be a good group to try to break into, right? Because they're going to not be interested in talking to you. So if you feel like people are really locked in, it'll be way easier to talk to that other group compared to those 2, for example, right? So what we're going to do now is actually a little exercise around these things. how to break into a group who's already talking. So we're going to get up here, everyone. This is one of those tricky aspects. How many do we have again? 2. Good. So we're going to do 4 groups. And we're going to do 4 groups. So you're a group over here. That's good. You two come over here. You are a 3-person group here, and you come over here. I need 4 volunteers who will be lonely wolves. Will you be a volunteer?
Yep.
Who else gonna volunteer? Yes? Come up here. And 2 more? Yes? And yes. Great. So you guys stand over here. Good. You're the lonely wolves. And then we have a group of 3 people here. I think actually we're going to get everyone over here. This is a little bit easier. Okay, so the 2 of you come over here. Everyone come closer, come over here. Everyone come closer. And then the 3 of you are here. Good. And all the lonely wolves are over here. You guys come closer.
Where do I go?
Yeah, you just stand here. That's perfect. And then we have a 3-person group here and a 3-person group here. Great. So we have 4 discussion groups going on at this networking event, and we have 4 lonely wolves. And the lonely wolves will have to break into one of these conversations in a more or less natural way. And you can choose whether you make it really easy for them, and one of you might act as a host and just invite them in, or you can try to make it a little harder and use your shoulders a little bit. Right? So don't make it too easy. So what happens is that you start a conversation in each group, whatever you want to talk about. And then after 30 seconds or so, the lonely wolves will come out and they'll break into conversation. After 30 seconds, when they break into your group, somebody else has to leave. And you now are the lonely wolf, and you will have to break in somewhere else. And we're going to stop this when everyone has tried to be the lonely wolf. Okay? So conversations start, and then lonely wolves will wait a little bit.
Are you also hungry or just lonely?
What's that?
Are you also hungry?
Hungry or also lonely? Well, up to you, my friend. Whatever you feel like. And there's sort of different strategies on how to do this. Like either sort of, finding a natural point in that conversation where you can sort of break in, or you can just be really plain. It's like, hey, I'm Henrik, right? But you'll figure it out. Let's try this out. You go ahead.
Okay.
Whenever I go to parties, I end up still talking to my wife. So
yes,
yeah,
that's
I'm
the tricky
one of those
thing.
people. Just
yeah, it's hard, right? So this exercise might be good for you. Give it a try.
My brother's there, so I don't want
Okay, yeah, do somewhere else. That's good. Excellent, mate. Cool. So what did you sense here? Was it hard? I saw this group initially here was really tough on you. They were like, no, we're not going to let her in. So different strategies, like, yeah, what did you sort of notice? Like, what was the best way to enter a conversation?
I just barged in.
You just barged in?
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually used to be a lone wolf in my teenage years, and I grew out in my early 20s, so
Yeah.
now I
you just jump in.
I just barge in wherever I
Okay,
go.
and just interrupt the conversation, or?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how, intimate or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's just friendly or whatever, then I'm just like, hey, how's it going?
Okay, yeah, so that's one way of doing it. Just sort of interrupt the crowd and just be confident enough, like, hey, I'm an interesting addition to this conversation, so of course I'll do it. Another strategy would be to do what?
Go for a person that you maybe know already, or someone you ran into, so
Yeah.
it's a bit less awkward.
Yeah, so that's another strategy entirely, right? When you go to a networking event with a friend or a colleague, then you sort of have a safe base. The danger in that is that you end up talking to that person all night, as we talked about over here. Like sometimes I just end up talking to my wife all night, and that's not really why you go to a networking event, right? To talk to your colleagues you already know. So it's really important that you quickly break out of that. But it can be, if you feel it's uncomfortable, like a safe way to get started, because then at least you have somebody initially, and then you start inviting other people in, and then eventually you will move apart and meet other people. That can be one way. And then another strategy is sort of to listen to the conversation and then wait until you have something interesting to say, and then sort of introduce yourself or add something to that conversation. It's typically very individual hopefully someone in that 3-group or 3-person group will be more open, and then you can at least try to position yourself in a way where you can get eye contact with that person, and then you initially maybe start by introducing you to that person. Maybe it's not the person who's talking right now, but you could start by just saying hi to one of the other people, and then that person can keep talking. So those dynamics are all very individual, and again, yeah, when you sense that some people are really not inviting you in, then maybe better to go for some other conversation. But it can be awkward. Have you ever come across like sometimes where you feel like you got some pushback when you're just like, hey, how are you?
Yeah, it has happened a couple of times when there's just been no response. I'm just like, really?
Okay.
And after a couple of minutes, I'm just like,
okay, whatever. Yeah, back to the bar. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So just a couple of things here. I'm almost done. But wanted to talk a little bit about your sort of online presence. So in this day and age, very important to not just maintain a good image from the people who know you, but also your online image, right? So do Google yourself. When was the last time you Googled yourself? A few years ago. Last night? There we go. Last month? Okay. So especially if in the process of searching for a job, pretty good idea to find out what's on YouTube, what's on Instagram, what's on Facebook, what's on just Google the first couple of pages, because your employer will check it out, right? Of course. Oh.
I don't have a Facebook account.
Okay.
I remember reading an article in the Age that said some employers now look at that and think you're socially awkward if you don't have a Facebook account.
If you don't have a Facebook account.
So not what's on there that could be bad and damaging for your interview, but the lack of it could be, to some people, well, what's wrong with this person?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, you might. If you're trying to become a social media manager, then especially, right? But I think it depends on the job. But if you're in a job that sort of requires you to become a very socially well-connected person, they might ask you, or at least you should at least be ready for that question in the interview, right? So like, well, maybe I just maintain my network in other channels. And I know a lot of very successful professional individuals that are not on Facebook, and that's also fine. But it's definitely the norm nowadays. So you need to have an answer for why not. But I think it's all right. But one thing, if you're on Facebook or Instagram or any of these other portals, there is this little feature where you can go in and you can say, view my profile as either my friends or as the public would view it. And I at least got pretty surprised to see what kind of things I had shared, apparently under public, instead of just sharing with my friends. So there might be some pretty embarrassing photos from that frat party that you don't want to have out in the public eye. So check out those settings and make sure to sort of figure out what's actually publicly available about yourself. And that's another good reason to have a LinkedIn profile, because LinkedIn is very well search engine optimized. So it's typically the first thing that shows up when somebody Googles your name will be your LinkedIn profile. And that's one of the sort of growth hacks for LinkedIn, why it becomes so popular, because people really like to have that professional presence. And again, if there are other sort of search results on the first page you're not super proud of, then try to create, like maybe you want to set up a blog, or maybe you want to create an About Me page, or something else that portrays the type of image you like to portray to the public. And this was in regards to just like these LinkedIn connections, not to brag about my network, but it's just, I have a lot of these unanswered requests. And you can see the difference here is like, none of these have added a personal note. Sahan, and he's now accepted already, right? But he says, hey, Henrik, I had a great experience, blah, 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 right? But people will not accept your LinkedIn request if you don't add that personal note. It really makes a world of difference. So whenever you're linking up with somebody, you can opt for that add personal note. It doesn't have to be a lengthy summary of everything you've talked about, but just like some kind of quick reference to, hey, we met at this event. I really enjoyed our conversation about how robots are going to take over the world. Let's connect for future opportunities, right? Here's a couple of concrete examples, like how Jamal reached out and said, hey, Henrik, it was good to meet you earlier today. Hope you had a productive, successful visit here at Deakin. Please accept my invitation to connect with me here on LinkedIn. And they say, hey, Jamal, great meeting as well. Thanks for linking up, right? Or Kyle said, hey, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn. I don't know where my future will take me right now, but I hope to share my success with you someday, right? Of course, everyone was going to link you up with you if you add that little personal touch. Here's an example of of a LinkedIn request that I sent to Yuri Minkov, He's the CEO of Rebecca Minkoff. Some of the girls might know this fashion brand that connects, that includes sort of try to integrate technology in fashion design. So I have a pretty cool way of doing that. I was moderating a panel with Rebecca Minkoff and Yuri, the CEO, and then afterwards I said, hey, Yuri, it was great to meet you at NYU earlier this week. Thanks again for taking the time to do the program and for your thoughtful answers, blah, 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 and accepted the LinkedIn request, right? So those personal connections can really be, make a huge difference, especially if you're trying to connect with a speaker or something like that. Oh yeah, and regarding speakers, if you're at a conference and you really like to talk to the keynote speaker, try to talk to the keynote speaker before they go on stage. Because what happens right after the presentation? There's like a line of people that wants to talk to that person. And it's really hard to sort of get some personal time. So either talk to them like right before the event or later on during the day. And again, have something interesting, memorable way to stand out for them. Because everyone wants to, just suck up to these people and talk about how great their book is or whatever else. Like maybe you come up and say to them, hey, I really disagree with you on this point that you said here. Like, do you want to expand on that? Like, people will be much more intrigued by somebody who's standing out, somebody a little bit edgy, something unique and interesting in that way. And then I just wanted to include this really practical stuff on email introductions. How many of you send email introductions really often? Oh, you all do. Okay, so most people are fairly familiar with this. But for those who are not, it's just really easy to make these mistakes, and I see it all the time, and it's just such an easy thing to fix, so I just wanted to include this as well. When you are asking for an introduction, remember to ask nicely. Right? This is actually a pretty big favor. Right? I've spent the last 15 years building my network. Right? It's pretty valuable to me. My network is my net worth. So if you're asking to be introduced to somebody that I have in my network, that I met at a conference, that I've taken out for coffees and dinners in order to have that relationship, that's actually a pretty big favor. So explain why this is a valuable introduction to both parties, right? If I'm going to introduce you to the founder of YouTube, I need to know that it's valuable for him as well, right? So you put explain to me why it's valuable for you, why you will like that intro, but also what you have to offer this other person. So I don't feel like I'm, of course, giving you a favor, but it's also maybe a favor to my other connection, because you have something you can offer them. And then make it easy. You can actually write up that blurb that you would like me to use in that email introduction. Right, so make it super easy. All I need to do is just forward that email. That's it. Really easy sell then. Instead of me having to write it up and explaining who the different parties are, unless you're asking this favor from a really close friend that you know is gonna do it for you, then make it really easy. When you receive the introduction, follow up the same day, right? If you don't follow up, you make me look like an idiot because I introduced you and clearly you don't even care, right? So that's taking time. You're using my time and you're using my connections time to read your email, and then you don't even follow up. And it's not the other person who will follow up first, it is you who asked for the introduction. Right? So you follow up quickly, and the way you follow up is that you include whoever introduced you on that email, either in the CC or in the BCC field. And then you say, thank you, Henrik, for the introductions. Now move to BCC to save your inbox. And then you say, hi, whatever, Java Karim, I'm really interested in blah, blah, blah. Okay? And you say, thanks for the dinner, move to BC. And later on, if you could, for example, send another thank you note to whoever introduced you, saying, hey, thanks for this. We ended up having a really good conversation. Now I know as a sender that you actually followed up, and I know sort of that something good came out of it. And again, if this was really valuable, you might want to send a book, or you might want to send me a gift card or something. If it was really valuable to you, you landed a $10,000 job out of, or $10,000 gig out of this introduction, maybe you actually owe it to that person to give you something to him. If you get asked to make an introduction, okay, so you have somebody in your network that another person knows, then you should ask why it's valuable for both parties. That's perfectly reasonable to ask. you ask your other contact if it's okay for you to introduce this other person to them. Right? So some people don't like their email shared. Some people are just not interested in getting other introductions. So if it's a high-level type of really busy person, the most respectful thing to do is, instead of just sending off that introduction, is to ask them first, hey, would it be okay if I introduce you to X person? This is what they need to connect you on. Then you send the introduction introducing both parties and include why you think people will benefit from the introduction. You thank the other contact for taking the time, and that's it. This is a fun little exercise in terms of personal branding that I found to be pretty interesting. If you're interested in understanding other people's perception of you, you can go and ask some people that know you fairly well, maybe some of your contacts or professional contacts, maybe some of your colleagues, maybe family members or just your friends, and ask them, hey, what is the first word that comes to mind when you think of me? Well, not now. You can. But it's just interesting to sort of have that kind of litmus test and see, well, is that how I want to be perceived? Is that in accordance to the type of image I would like people to have? Or is it different? And then how could I change that? And also ask me, well, why did you say that? What makes you think about that? So that could be a fun little test. Be patient. Good things come to those who wait. I came across this beautiful sign the other day in a restaurant. Wouldn't you agree? No! Be impatient and get off the couch and do something awesome. Right? Life is too short to wait around for opportunities to happen. They won't happen by themselves. Is that us? Maybe. So be impatient. Be proactive about creating those opportunities for yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a real pleasure working with you today. I hope this was somewhat useful and helpful. Here's my LinkedIn and email. And at startupexperience.com/resources, you can find the slides from tonight as well. I'm also available if any of you want to have a one-on-one session with me to talk about typically your startup business, but it could also be about anything else. So you can go to scheel.youcanbook.me, and there you'll be able to book like a 30-minute slot at some point. I'm here in Geelong until Friday, and then I'll be in Melbourne Monday, Tuesday next week. But thank you so much for your time this evening. Thanks, guys.